Hello YouTube. When I picked up this car, it was in driving condition. However, the brake feel wasn't great. My hunch is there's air in the system. A driver can compensate by braking earlier, but that's not ideal for performance driving or emergency stopping scenarios. Therefore, we make sure the brakes are properly maintained. Under the hood, the brake master cylinder looks relatively new. However, the fluid inside is dark, dirty, and gets contaminated easily. I will flush it out, and this should be done every few years. If you don't have an impact tool, loosen the lug nuts by stepping on a wrench with all your weight. Slipping a long pipe over also works. I chalked the rear tires to prevent the car from rolling away. There is a rounded jacking point on the subframe. Set 2 jack stands to the same height and place them under the pinch well between the notches. This car is old, so I don't care if it gets slightly deformed, but there are ways to minimize such damage. Repeat for the back. The jacking point is also a rounded area on the cross member. I prefer doing brake work with the car low on jack stands instead of a lift. For those with back problems, it may be easier to mount and remove wheels when you don't have to lift it several feet in the air. I'm not doing any work underneath, but if you have to, slide the wheels under as insurance if the jack stands fail. You can also leave the floor jack slightly engaged. Give the car a good shake. If it wobbles or does anything funky, you definitely don't want to crawl under. Steel wheels often seize to the hub, so try removing with least abrasive methods first. Leave a single lug nut so the wheel doesn't fly off once it breaks free. If your wheels have these holes, threading the right size bolt should pop it loose. Otherwise, start with a rubber mallet. If that doesn't work, try lying on your back and kicking it hard. You can also use a wood block and partially lower the car. Once the suspension loads, the wheel may pop free. One of these would not come off without a sledgehammer, but be careful not to dent the wheel. Once off, it is a good time to inspect the tires for any uneven tread wear. Before we inspect the rear brakes, disengage the parking brake or the drum won't come off. A quick spin shows that it could use some tightening. If the drum won't spin or come off at all, it needs to be loosened. Both can be done using this access hole. The drum may simply be rusted in place, so you can use a M8 bolt to pop it off. The pad material is 4mm thick, which isn't too bad, but some people like to change these sooner than later. The drum diameter is still less than the maximum spec of 230.6mm. Put on a mask and clean up the drum and center hole as necessary. Spray some brake clean and watch the crud drip out. This is the adjuster which spreads the brake shoes in and out. Since I need to tighten it, moving the screwdriver handle up creates a pivot. This spins the start gear down and expands the brake shoes outwards. Loosening would be the opposite direction, pushing the screwdriver handle down. There is a lock retainer which may require a second tool if the drum is mounted during adjustment. I expand it until the pads barely touch the drum, allowing it to only spin a half to 1 full turn. Once again, if it's too tight, you won't even be able to get the drum on or off. The front pad and rotor thicknesses are also fine, so let's continue. Test cracking open all the bleeders with a 8mm 6-point socket. Check for rust and seizing. Unfortunately, bleeder screws can strip or worse, snap off. That immediately ruins your day by making the car undrivable, so work smart. Bleeding is often done with a flare nut wrench, which prevents rounding off the nut. Actually, my flare wrench won't fit in the back, so I use an offset wrench. I sometimes feel they do shit like this to force you to bring the car in for service. How many people have this kind of wrench lying around? Suck out the old fluid from the master cylinder. Some people remove all of it. I like to stop at the minimum line. Depending on design, some master cylinders may introduce air below that area. That would easily complicate the job. If you care about your car's paint, quickly wipe up any spills. Fill all the way to the top with new brake fluid. Place a block under the brake pedal to keep the master cylinder pistons from overextending. Traditionally, bleeding is done with a second person inside the car. I also have a pressure bleeder, but no cap that fits this car. So using a water bottle, I made this contraption which allows you to bleed by yourself. Leaving some fresh fluid on the bottom prevents air from getting sucked back into the bleeder. Starting at the rear right side for US cars, crack open the bleeder screw and repeatedly press down the brake pedal. You will see bubbles and/or dark fluid coming out. Continue until the fluid transitions from dirty to clean. In my case, from green to clear yellow. Top off the master cylinder often and don't let it run below the minimum line. Otherwise, you are introducing more air and wasting time. After you finish, remove excess fluid from the master cylinder until it is at the maximum line. Throw out the remaining bottle of brake fluid. It's already absorbing moisture as we speak. 1 or 2 large bottles should be sufficient for the entire job. Add some grease around the hub to allow easier wheel removal next time. I had to impact all my lug nuts back on, which isn't quite normal. I was worried it was stripped wheel studs, but fortunately my spare lug nuts fit fine. I cleaned the old lug nuts by removing rust, but to no avail. I guess these were previously stripped by over-torquing. I'm not going to bother rethreading something that keeps wheels mounted on the car. In the trash they go. Hand tighten the lug nuts in a star pattern. I like to lower the car just until the tires touch the ground. I then torque the lug nuts to 80 pound-foot before the suspension is fully loaded. Start the car and pump up the brakes. While reversing out, make sure the brakes actually work. Drive around and see how it feels. You may have to repeat the bleeding procedure if there is a lot of air in the system. This car does not have ABS, but some cars need the ABS system bled as well. This usually involves a scan tool to open up the lines during bleeding. Another option while the car is still lifted, drive the car to 30 miles per hour and brake hard to freak out the ABS. Obviously there are safety drawbacks to doing this, so many people simply go out late at night and do the same thing on a deserted road. My car's stopping ability and brake pedal feel has improved. If it got worse, double check your work. If you paid attention at the beginning, this parking brake now engages much lower, so this was a result of adjusting the rear brake shoes. All I know is it feels beautiful. If there are other issues, that is beyond the scope of this video. You could have a pinched brake hose, a bad master cylinder, stuck caliper, and many other things. However, this is a good starting point in terms of common maintenance. If you learned something new in this video today, please like and subscribe and see you all next time.